Welcome to Merryfield's Gardening Advisor, brought to you by the experts at Merryfield Garden Center. Join us as we discover beautiful plants, new trends, and exciting ideas for your landscape. So let's get growing together. Merryfield's Gardening Advisor, bringing out the best in your garden.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Merryfield's Gardening Advisor. I'm your host, Debbie Warhurst-Kapp, along with our wonderful gardening expert, David Yost. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh, fantastic.
All right.
Fantastic.
And we hope you're doing very well as well. And we've got a great show for you today. You know, lawns is a big part of anyone's landscape, but there's so much more to the landscape than just having lawns. There are alternatives.
Yes, there are. And like I said, we'll just touch briefly on lawns today, but really the focus always going to be on those alternatives. There's a lot of ground covers that we're going to be covering today that provide you very functional uses in terms of being able to tolerate a little foot traffic, erosion control, but also lend a lot of beauty to the landscaping garden as well. So that's pretty much the focus of today's show, looking at these ground covers and different ways that you can deal with shade, sun, hillsides, all different types of environments. And of course, later in the program, we'll be taking phone calls.
Absolutely. So save those questions up. Before we get started, a couple of quick announcements. Our seminars are in full swing now at all three Merryfield Garden Center locations. So let's take a look at what we've got on tap today. Actually, when we finish here, David is going to run right out of here and go to our Merryfield location and talk about lawn alternatives.
Right. At this seminar, you'll even see some repeat of what we talk about in today's program. But the nice thing is at the seminars we have a little more time, so I'll be able to elaborate, expand a little bit, go in more depth, and also the opportunity for question and answer. And as I always say, it's a sharing experience of learning from each other.
Oh,
so
yes.
Everybody that comes to these seminars brings their own experience, and we'd like to just kind of chat back and forth and share notes of what's working for different people in different conditions.
That's great.
It's always a good time.
And that is at our, again, at the Merryfield location, actually at the Merryfield Community Hall, which is right next door to our location at 8104 Lee Highway. At our Fair Oaks location today, Karen Rexroad is going to be talking about fabulous fall container gardens. So she is so talented at that. So, whether it's flower pots, hanging baskets, window boxes, whatever, they're beautiful, they're easy, and they're very rewarding. So learn how to create your own. That's at 12101 Lee Highway in Fairfax, again at 10 a.m. And at our Gainesville location, it's our Just for Kids. Regina Lenkto is going to be showing some kids how to create something special and teach them about gardening. So that's at 10 a.m. At Gainesville, 6895 Wellington Road in Gainesville. So again, all these are at 10 a.m. We've got a whole slew of fantastic seminars coming up. Next week, we've got 3 more great topics: fall lawn care, beautiful displays with bulbs and perennials, and ornamental grasses and companion plants. And a little spoiler alert: in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a special celebrity landscaper coming up. So we'll just tease you with that. So that is for our seminars. Great things to do on a Saturday. Might be rainy, so it's a perfect opportunity to something fun and educational to do.
Well, I was looking at all those classes, fall containers, and next week fall lawn care and stuff. It's actually starting to feel like fall out there as well.
It is.
So
Today is going to be this whole weekend is going to be nice.
I call this one of those transition times where it is, whether it's your containers, your garden, your lawn, where we take everything right now to get prepared as we move into that fall season. I know,
because things are still looking good from summer in a lot of cases, and you don't necessarily want to change, but you do.
It's time to be looking ahead, though.
Exactly. Also, tomorrow at our Fair Oaks location, our friends at the Arlington Rose Foundation, they're going to be having a rose photography workshop. So take advantage of that. It's from 2 to 4 at our Fair Oaks location. It's free, light refreshments, so you can learn a lot about taking pictures of your beautiful roses. So that is all I have for announcements, I think. Can you think of anything else?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to start out talking about, again, everybody knows I work at the plant clinic, and we're always busy there, whatever the season, and we're doing a lot of troubleshooting and helping people. So we're just going to start out today, once again, looking at sort of the ugly side of gardening, if you'll just excuse me for a minute on that, and then we'll get back to the pretty stuff a little bit later. But what I want to start with is what we're getting lots and lots and lots of people coming into the plant clinic every day with different weeds showing up in their lawn. And
it's
this is really exactly. It's late summer. You know, all the weeds have been growing there throughout the summer months. You know, they're reaching maturity, and now people are kind of focusing on the lawn care. So, a couple of the more common ones, the ones I really want to talk about. We'll start with the picture here. Is some summer annual grasses. So I've got a picture here. You can see the crabgrass on the top. That's one that's been around. You know, that's familiar to everybody. And that crabgrass, and then below that is one that's called Japanese stiltgrass. This is the one that we see people bringing in over and over and asking, what is this stuff? What is it? Well, Japanese stiltgrass, I mean, as you can see in the little graphic there, you know, it was introduced to this country. It was used as a packaging material, you know, importing materials from Asia. And we first found it escaped, and it first found as a weed back in 1919. But over the years, you know, it's continued to spread and multiply and spread and multiply and spread and multiply. And now it's just almost as common as the crabgrass that you see up there. Now, both of these are similar in that they are what we call summer annual grasses. They grow during the summertime. They're flowering. They're producing seed now. And then when we get freezing temperatures, that kills them off, and they're dead for the year. But the plants produce thousands of seeds. As you're seeing up there, you know, one plant might produce 1,000 seed, and that seed persists in the soil for year after year. It doesn't all magically sprout and germinate at the same time. So even though I'm saying, hey, it lives and it dies this year, that seed's going to persist for years afterwards. So if you're finding this stuff in your lawn, you're finding the stilt grass, which tends to be more concentrated in sort of damp, shady environments, and the crabgrass in sunny conditions, we can treat them the same way. You have a choice. Basically, you can say, well, these things are going to die with the freezing temperatures in about another 6 to 8 weeks, and I'm just going to be done with it, and I'll get on a preventative program next year, and there are some preventers we can put down next year. Or if you chose to, you could come in and spray your lawn with this Bermuda grass control from Bayer. This Bermuda grass control does kill stilt grass, it kills crabgrass, and it does not harm your lawn. But I think you have to be realistic in your expectations.
Tilt that a little bit.
Which means that it really works on young crabgrass and young stilt grass. So my point is, if you were to apply it right now, really you may only get about 50% control, because it will kill off the younger, less mature weeds, but it's not going to kill the really big stuff that's going to seed.
Right.
So your choices come down to you just kind of ignore and tolerate it, get on a preventive program next year. This stuff's fairly easy to hand pull if it's not too extensive, so hand pulling works. Or you can use this Bermuda grass control for lawns, and it does a very good job, but like I said, it's only going to take out the young stuff. You're not going to get complete total control.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, we're ready for the pretty stuff now, right?
We are. One last quick
right
thing I want to say that was, hey, with this, you can come back and reseed immediately after application.
Great.
So it doesn't interfere with your lawn care program.
Okay, we'll take a quick break and come right back. Welcome back. We're talking about ground covers or lawn alternatives today. But it's there's so much more than lawn alternatives ground covers are. They just make your landscape look beautiful.
They are, and I want to just start out with a few things to consider when you're going in to select, because there really are just so many options that are available to you. I always feel like the first thing I do, and this is really true in any aspect of my landscape, is I look at the function. What's the purpose of it? I'm always saying in my own garden, whether I'm talking about flowers or trees or shrubs, I always say every plant I put in there has a job to do.
Right.
And that's the same thing with ground covers. So one of the things that happens a lot of ground covers is this something that you're going to be walking on? How much traffic will it tolerate? Or is it something you're just putting on there for erosion control?
Good point.
Are you putting on there just to save the maintenance so that you don't have to deal with lawn care? So really think in terms of what's the job of that plant that I want to do. And then we also need to very much observe the environment and match the plant to the correct environment. You know, is it sun? Is it shade? How much sun? You know, is it poorly drained area? All those type of considerations that go in. And this is the same thing we are always preaching with anything, whether you're talking about a tree, you know, or in this case, you're talking about ground cover. The thing that happens a lot of times with ground covers, though, if we're talking about large areas particularly, you start thinking, okay, well, how am I going to establish this? Is this, if we're talking about big areas, is it something you need to be planting from seed? Is it something that you're going to be able to select plants and put in there? Is it something that you're buying little transplants and starter trays? Because that can also start to influence a lot of what your cost is.
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about some different things that some of these ground covers are very aggressive spreading growth habits because we want them to cover a lot of ground.
But on the other hand,
maybe they get a little out of control
invasive
kind of stuff.
Yep.
You know, so to me, when I was preparing this, I really started thinking there's I think almost more thought that goes into this than you know, some of the trees and shrubs that we're dealing with.
Yeah, especially because of the possible aggressiveness of some of these plants. You really do have to be careful where you put them and how you put them.
Yeah,
if they're
absolutely.
In a container versus the ground.
I keep saying, hey, we'll look at these. We select them because we want them to spread, and then we start complaining because they spread. You know, so you just have to be aware of all those kind of things that go into it. And then, of course, it's what we tend to put a real high priority on, but I think is really the end of my shopping list, is the aesthetics of it. You know, the color, the texture, the flowers, all those kind of considerations, which is very important. But we have to think about those other factors as well. So a lot of times, in a lot of situations, when you start sorting all this out together and figuring out, there's only one guess what our most popular, most often selected ground cover would be.
What?
Turf grass. And again, we'll start a little picture there. And it makes really perfectly good sense because when you think in terms of grass or in lawns, you know, the versatility of, you know, full sun to part shade, their durability in terms of wear and tear tolerance and all the different uses we can put it under. And also in terms of the ease of establishment, being able to grow it from seed and so on is relatively economical. So it's no wonder that turf grass is sort of the #1 choice that's out there. But again, that's the last picture of grass you're going to see today. We're going to talk the rest of the morning here on some of the other alternatives and options where maybe you've just had enough of lawns that's out there. So one of the things, our lawns are sun-loving plants. They will tolerate a degree of shade, but they're not really what we call shade-loving plants. So sometimes, for example, if you're in a very shady environment and you might be looking for some other options, here's what I'm calling sort of some of the other more traditional types of ground covers that we may have to work with. See, maybe it's easy. Oh, there we got it. And this is Pachysandra. Pachysandra is a good choice for shade environments because it's evergreen. It stays fairly close to the ground, you know, maybe 8 inches tall, that type of thing. Gets a little flower in spring, but it's really grown for this nice evergreen foliage. This is typical of how it's purchased. A lot of times we've got a tray here. I didn't bother counting. I'll probably have something like about 25 plants in the tray. You put these little plants in the ground, space them maybe 6 inches apart, and within a couple years you sort of have that dense cover. So this works for a lot of environments in shade where we're looking for evergreen coverage. Right next to it here, the vinca. Vinca, or a lot of times it's called periwinkle because it gets that nice periwinkle blue flower on in spring. Again, you can see it has this trailing, creeping, spreading type growth habit. Does quite well in shade all the way up to I'll call kind of part sun. It even tolerates a little bit of direct sun in there. So these both make very nice evergreen covers where we're dealing with shade, and we're really good for just erosion control and keeping that soil in place and keeping things from washing out. Now another one that I brought in here, and these are all plants that you're familiar with, but is the ajuga, or a lot of times what's called bugleweed. This again is a little spreading evergreen ground cover, does well in shade and will adapt even to sun. There's a lot more varieties out there now than you might be familiar with. There's sort of this tri-colored version. One that I use in my own garden, and I absolutely love this plant, is one that's called black scallop. that very coarse, glossy leaf on there, that dark green. So this makes a nice contrast with other ornamental plants. And again, these things stay close to the ground. They get a little blue flower on it in spring. Now, as we've mentioned a couple times, with all these plants that I'm showing here, things like the Pachysandra, the Vinca, the Ajuga that's here, these things creep and spread, and you kind of have to maintain and keep them within bounds. If you don't keep an eye on it, they start to get a little beyond what we want and can become a little bit of a nuisance. Liriope, a beautiful functional plant. Again, evergreen foliage. All we do is we usually trim that off in early spring. Liriope, there's some types that are very aggressive and spreading, and there might be environments where you want that. But if it's something that needs to stay in place, there are also clump forming ones, and you need to talk to us. You need to ask the professionals at our garden centers and make clear if it's something that you want that's going to be well behaved and stay in a clump, or something that's going to spread out. English ivy. English ivy is one that's causing a lot of headaches in the landscape because this not only spreads on the ground, but it also tends to climb up trees. But it may still have its use and functions. Just need to be very careful with where it's applied or where you plant it, because it does want to spread, it does want to climb, it wants to go everywhere. But I have some environments of sort of shady conditions and so on where that can be actually a desirable characteristic. And then I have one other, and this is my absolute favorite that I want to show in here, is the dwarf mondo grass. It's not a grass. It's actually, I think, in the lily family, or what's now the asparagus family. It's evergreen. This makes a very low carpet, grass-like type of environment. Does well in shade. The thing that sometimes bothers people with this a little bit is that it can be slow in growing. I've planted it in my garden, for example. It's been about year 4. I put the plants maybe 12 inches apart, and I'm hoping maybe next year I'll have 100% coverage in there. But it does give us this nice, dense, carpet-like, lawn-like growth, but it doesn't require the mowing, the watering, the fertilizing and such the lawn would do, and it grows well in shade. Now, these are just a few of the ones, and they're probably some of those that are more familiar to you. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, I want to show you a lot more ground covers and other options and alternatives to consider for your garden.
Welcome back. We're talking away.
So we were talking about some ground covers, and if we can bring that picture up real quick, I wanted to talk about a few of these plants.
Right.
Now we were talking about things that spread real aggressively, things like the liriope and the ivy and all, and because they spread so aggressively, they cover big areas, but they can also become very invasive, even in crowding out competing vegetation, requiring maintenance to keep them within bounds. Now, plants we're looking at here are much nicer, more well-behaved plants to give you some good alternatives for ground covers and shade. That Japanese forest grass, there's a few different varieties. You're looking at the one that's called Aurea that has that nice yellow variegation. And then sort of trailing down between it is the big root geranium. And then I put the ligularia, is not really ground cover, but that's that big coarse leaf that's in there, and that just kind of breaks up and gives you some nice textures. So you can get a lot more innovative, a lot more creative, and start mixing some of these ground covers together that are less aggressive, get a nicer composition going in your garden. But this really lends itself more to probably smaller areas where you maybe have a little more time and patience and don't necessarily need some of those aggressive spreaders.
I like that term, well-behaved.
Yes. Now another
Don't
one
think of plants in those terms as much, but it's really very appropriate.
Yeah, it is. They stay put. They're not running all over the place.
That's right.
I brought a couple others in here, the desk I wanted to show off. We were looking at the Pachysandra that most people are familiar with. It's an Asian one that's evergreen and spreads more aggressively. Well, there is a native Pachysandra that you're seeing right here that's called Allegheny spurge or something. And you can see the similarity that it has in its leaf texture and shape and so on that's there. Now, this is not as aggressive. Again, it's a much nicer, more well-behaved plant. I'll say that again. it's not as consistently evergreen. You know, a lot of times if we have a cold winter like we had last year, it's going to die back to the ground. But a lot of times we're looking for native alternatives to some of these other ground cover options. So this is great for that woodland environment. Right next to it, I brought a couple of gingers in. Now this is the one I'm showing here is the European ginger. We do also have a native one, but I was showing this off because it really has this beautiful variegation in the leaf. Our native one is more of a solid evergreen. Also just because when I was rounding up things, we sell the native, I just don't have it in stock right now today,
Gotcha.
but it's something we can easily get for you. Now things like ginger and this native pachysandra and all I'm showing, the thing is you have to just be aware they're not as aggressive, which is good, but it also means they need a little more time, so you have to have that type of patience with them. I also brought in the foam flower, or tiarella, which is another native perennial that does creep and spread, and it forms a nice ground cover in there, gets a nice white flower on there. So again, these are just a few, and we could go on all day, but we don't have time to do that.
I love that.
It sure does. I want to switch gears now to ground covers that you can walk on, things that tolerate traffic, because this is a big thing. These are all beautiful little flowers, and we showed some good examples of them in the garden, but you really can't go trampling through there and stomping on these plants.
Right.
And a lot of times, hey, we're looking for things. This is back to saying the functionality of it. Grass and lawns are one of the few ground covers that really withstand foot traffic. But if you don't want grass, but you have foot traffic, this is where we really need to start talking about paths. And one of the things that we can do is like this is a nice garden path, but leaving chunks of space, leaving large gaps between the pavers so we can go in and plant in there. And then there's some ground covers that will tolerate light foot traffic that we can sort of work in between these stones. A couple of the better ones, if we were to take a closer look at this walk here, you'd start finding a lot of thyme worked into the cracks there and there. Thyme is a very low-growing herb. You wouldn't believe how many different varieties there are, you know, woolly thyme, variegated thyme, the green ones, you know, the flowers. This tries to give you an idea of some of what's in there. But thyme is probably my first go-to for this when we're talking about sort of a sunny, hot, dry environment. Sedum is another one that works quite well between the steps. This is just you know, the one that we call sempervirens, and this is what's growing in the cracks and crevices of those stones. And again, they'll take the heat, they'll take the dry environment and the sunny conditions. Again, there's just, you know, hundreds of different types of sedum, and they can be grouped together into sort of a collage, as you can see here, and these will eventually grow together, forming a nice solid ground cover along the edge of the walk. So you can't go trampling through these and stomping on the plants, but they're nice here along the edge of the sidewalk, or worked in between the cracks and crevices of stones and stepping paths that are there where you need to get access. Another one that is very useful, this is one that's called Ernieria, or sometimes it's called rupture wort. You can see in this picture where it's literally growing in the cracks between the stone that's there. Another one that spreads, it's heat and drought tolerant, will withstand that occasional foot traffic that's in there. If it's more a moist, shady environment, then I'd like to go towards Mazis. Mazis has a neat little flower that will come on there. There's both a sort of a purple flower and a white flower. It gives you that benefit. Here, this is almost a drainage swale that's in there with the flagstone going through there and the little ground cover that's in there. There's so much need for this plant that some of them have come out with collections that we call steppables a lot of times. And I brought, again, a few examples of that showing. So there's steppables, and then they also coined this name that's called treadwell, and they're grouped together under these names so that they're easy to find that's in there. Some of these I brought into the studio that you're looking at, like this variegated pennywort that you might be able to see in there. It gives us a little color. That's one that does well in moist conditions. The creeping jenny, which many of you know, that's another one that we use in baskets and does well in sun or shade, and does quite well even in wet aquatic environments. Even have a little door form of this evergreen shrub. It's a type of euonymus ground cover we'll see again show up later. So many choices. I'm just saying, when you come into the garden center, talk to our professionals in there, and they kind of help guide you through some of the best that's there. But plants only withstand a certain amount of traffic. At some point, you have to acknowledge plants are not always the answer, and a beautiful gravel path or walkway can really be your ultimate ground cover also.
And there's so many new choices with those too that it's fantastic. So.
Many different types of stone. You're exactly right.
Oh yeah. Okay, we're going to take another break, and we will be back in just a couple of minutes. So we were talking in the last segment about other alternatives to plants being other alternatives to ground covers being pavers, stones. Another wonderful thing is gravel. That's just, look how beautiful that is in the nice woodland setting in the in a little shady garden there too.
Absolutely. The ultimate and functional and low maintenance that's
right.
in there.
That's right. And you know, there's different colors that it comes in too, which is nice.
Oh yeah,
so.
yeah. You can have a lot of fun. Again, there's so many choices in all these materials.
Right.
But this, I'm going to switch over a little bit. We also want to talk a little bit about ground covers for very hot, shady or hot, sunny environments. And sometimes, again, you're just looking for a plant to stabilize a hill or something like that, just to cover a large area. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the junipers that are out there, and I think we brought some of our different options there.
Start bringing these over while you're looking at the shore one there.
Right. Now, junipers are really the go-to plant in hot, sunny conditions. They'll blanket a large area. They're very heat and drought tolerant. And so there's several of them that do spread and stay close to the ground. Now, the one you're looking at in that picture right there is called the shore juniper. It's got a soft, delicate texture to it. This one's called Blue Pacific because it has that sort of blue-green color to it. And what's a little unique about this one is it will actually tolerate a little bit of a light shade because, as I've mentioned, most of the junipers are sun-loving plants. This shore juniper is one that will tolerate a little bit of a light shade. And you can see it there. It's been used sort of cascading over a hill, where the hill is just too much trouble to get in there and mow it and edge it and stuff, and so it was planted with junipers. Now, this is a new introduction. It's the same species of plant, but this is the golden Pacific juniper. It just brings in that sort of golden yellow color. It has the same growth characteristics and qualities as the blue Pacific, but it gives us that blue coloration. This gives us the yellow coloration that's in there. So again, this is what we're talking about. It gives you that creative flair, the aesthetics we talked about in working with different colors. And Debbie's showing us a couple junipers up here.
Other different colors as well.
Right. And these are also very, very popular for use as ground covers for that sunny environment.
You can see how that trails. It's so pretty.
Low and close to the ground. The blue rug juniper, which is, again, one that's been used for years and years, has been around a lot, very popular. And it's a very tough, durable plant. And then right next to is the gold stripe, which is going to have the same characteristics, but a different range of color options.
Beautiful.
So again, you get to play the aesthetics. The one thing that junipers will not tolerate, of course, is that they will not take wet conditions. When we run into problems with junipers, it's because they're in heavy clay soil that's not getting enough drainage. But that's one of the reasons they're so useful on hillsides where we can provide the drainage that's there.
Right.
Now, a couple other plants I wanted to show you today for these kind of environments. Again, this is one that I'm starting to see more and more often because a lot of times as we're looking for native plants that are indigenous to our environment and do more than just sort of provide us a beautiful ground cover, but they also, as you can see in that inset, that close-up, this is one that will provide berries for the birds. So this serves a lot of different functions in the landscape. It sheds its leaves. It's not evergreen. And you can see by this picture, it's going to grow up to be about 3 feet tall. So this is the fragrant sumac or Rhus aromatica. A lot of times it's sort of confused or looks a little bit like a poison ivy, but it's closely related but does not give you the rash that's in there. So this will give you a nice red fall coloration. These shrubs kind of form a dense mat in there and provide that good erosion control and covering large areas of ground. Some others that you might want to look at, and we're going to switch over to a shade environment, is the sweet box, or sarcococa as it's called. This, again, it's a shrub, but this shrub or shrublet, as sometimes they're called, it spreads out. It will form a dense ground cover like this along that edge of walk, and it's quite tolerant of dry, shady conditions. So I'm trying to show, depending on whatever your environment is,
Right.
you know, there's different
There's
ground
choices
covers.
for everyone.
Exactly, that will match in there. A couple others that I brought along to show you today and these are really in our shrub section because we've been looking mostly at perennials up until this segment. Deutzia. Again, Deutzia is one for sunny environments. This is a dwarf variety. It's called Gracilis. And so it's going to stay down at about 2-3 feet tall. You can kind of see this trailing habit that it has, so it creeps and spreads out along the ground. It gets a beautiful little white flower in spring, and then it's followed with a deep burgundy color in fall, and then it does shed its leaves during the wintertime. So that's a good one for that kind of shade environment.
You want me to bring over a couple
Ellie,
here?
you brought a couple over on your side of the desk, Debbie. We'll just try to squeeze these in because I know I'm going to run out of time here.
I love this euonymus.
But again, even euonymus, we talked about it a couple times already today. This is an evergreen form. You can keep it pruned down. You just take your hedges and shear it, and it tends to creep and spread along the ground. And we have this one's called Gold Spot with that yellow variegation leaf, but there are others that have a white, and then there's a solid green. So you just come in and check it out for yourself. And this creeping bramble, I wanted to give that a little bit of airtime. The creeping bramble, I love that wrinkled texture that you see in the leaf that's on there. You can see how this just spreads and creeps. It covers large patches of ground, roots along the nodes that are in there.
Also called creeping raspberry.
Yeah, though it doesn't produce a berry.
I know.
Yeah, it does look like a raspberry, and they're the same family, but this will go a deep burgundy color for you in fall. Essentially, it does shed its leaves. If we have a real mild winter, it might stay evergreen, but in a cold winter, it's going to shed the leaves. Little white flower in spring, but again, this thing's going to spread out 3, 4, 5 feet wide or something, so great for growing along hillsides and such.
Great. You have one more picture to show us, I think?
One more picture before we wrap this segment up. Steep hillsides can be difficult to deal with. You don't want to be mowing and walking on them. So this is just an example where you can start combining all these different elements that are in there. And it's, you can see azaleas, the steps down the hillside, pachysandra. If you could look far enough back there, I think there's some trailing junipers that are in that picture. But it's just to show you how you really have to take all these different elements we've talked about, work with our landscape designers, really find the best solution for your situation.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to take your phone calls. So give us a call, 703-387-1046. We'd love to talk to you. Stay tuned. Get a little taste of fall. The pumpkins are in, the pansies are in, the mums are in, and the temperatures are feeling like fall, so come on in and take advantage of that. Okay, we're taking your phone calls, 703-387-1046. And our first caller is Linda, who's calling from Frederick. Are you there, Linda?
Yes, hi, good morning. How are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and thank you very much for your show. I really appreciate it every Saturday.
We appreciate your watching.
What's your question?
It isn't really a question. I was watching your ground covers, and you were talking about some of the herbs and stuff. And one year I accidentally planted sweet woodruff.
Yes.
And now it has taken over almost all my beds. It comes back every year, and it gets a little white flower on it, and it has beautiful foliage to it. I just wanted to pass that on as somebody wanted a ground cover that spreads. That's definitely one.
That's
I'm
great.
so glad you brought that up, because that was that's actually one of the pictures that I took out of my collection because I knew I had too much to do and was going to run out of time. But it is a wonderfully fragrant ground cover. And like I said, with all these things, you just have to be aware they are going to be spread, and it's best if you kind of research their spreading habits before you plant them. But it sounds like it's a good thing for you that's spreading out there.
Well, I like it because it'll grow in areas like under pines and stuff that get kind of dry, and also it'll grow in the sun or the shade.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another wonderful one, so I'm glad you brought that up with everybody.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you calling in today.
Have a great
Take
weekend.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's see. Our next caller is Tom, who's calling from Ashburn. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good morning.
Very good. I had a question for David. Has he done his annual lawn show yet with the fertilization and everything?
That's going to be next week. And I you know, what I have is I've got Dr. Goatley from Virginia Tech that's going to be coming up to be us on the show and then do a seminar. And this would have been like the perfect weekend for it, but we're working with his schedule. So you're just going to have to watch next week, Tom.
I'm jumping the gun.
Oh, actually, your timing is perfect, but you're just going to have to wait till next week.
Well, I had a quick question. I was just looking at the weather, and my plan was, you know, as we discussed, was to do the compost, seed, and then the fall fertilization. But, David, you know, it's supposed to rain today, and I'm wondering, would it hurt today if I went ahead and fertilized today and then did the composting and seeding next week?
No, I think that's fine. Now, I haven't looked at the details of the forecast. I mean, all this, if it gets watered in, that's great. So if we're talking about something like a half-inch of rain, that's like perfect. You couldn't ask for anything better. If you're talking about one of these huge downpours, you know, like I call it gully washers, where we're talking about an inch, 2 inches of rain, that's going to be a little too much. So just double-check the forecast. But if we're talking about, you know, half inch, 3/4, maybe up to an inch of rain, that would be fine. But if it's more than an inch, I'm going to tell you hold off and after the storm.
Okay, and then one more quick one. You know, I went ahead and bought, when I was at the store the other day, I got the...
Hey, Tom, where were you last week's lawn seminar?
Uh-oh.
What now?
Yeah, last week was our lawn seminar at the Fair Oaks store. I can't believe you missed that.
I have an excuse. We were in North Carolina at the Outer Banks, so I get
That's
a
not an
pass for
excuse.
that.
I thought I saw you down there. I was down there.
Is that what Debbie was? I got one more quick one. I know you got to go, but I was wondering, you know, I know I always do the Merrifield 3 fall fertilizations to get the optimum result, but I bought, when I was at the shop the other day, the Greenview fall fertilizer. I know that's a long-lasting one. Is it okay to use that one also 3 times, or should I only use that one twice, or what's your view on it?
No, use it the same. It's just it's very similar to the Merrifield formula. It is a little bit longer lasting that's in there. So that's a very good option to use also. But you're going to follow the same program of, you know, 2 or 3 applications in the fall.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, and be sure you're watching next week. No beach trips.
I'll be there.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay, our next caller is Susan, who's calling from Belle Alton. How are you, Susan?
Oh, good, and I really appreciate you taking my call, and I really enjoy your show every week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my question is, I have a lot of white oaks. I kind of live in the woods, and I've been using your tough play into my yard because it really seems to do well, but nothing grows under these trees. Is there a particular ground cover I could plant around my trees so I don't have all these bare spots?
Right. If you're trying to grow turf grass, you really need 2 to 3 hours of sun. When you start getting less than that, it is time to switch over to ground covers. As I was showing you, one of my favorites I really like is the dwarf mondo grass, but it's slow. You have to be patient with it, you know. So sometimes if you have a big area and you need to cover something, you know, something's a little faster and more aggressive, that's when I would say you might want to look at things like the periwinkle or the or pachysandra. You know, they're going to be a little more aggressive and faster growing. Again, if you are developing more of a garden, some of these different things we showed, like the foam flower, that tiarello does well in shade. So you've got quite a few things to work with. It really depends on how big of an area this is, you know, how fast it needs to spread, how much ground you need to cover, those type of options.
Right. And I do have a shade garden back there, and it's beautiful, but I'm having violets taken over. Should I leave them and let them be the ground cover, or should I try to get rid of it?
That's personal preference. Violets are often listed as a shade ground cover that's in
I
there
have no
it
clue
does
where they came
spread
from.
by rhizome. So there's a lot of them that are native, and some people just choose to let that grow as a native ground cover that's in there.
That's what I've been doing. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll try the other things around these trees. You're talking like from the tree to the point, probably a 4 foot, 5 foot circumference is what I need to cover. under these oak
Right.
trees.
I would encourage you to look at mondo grass, see if that fits your needs. Like I said, for me, that's one of my personal favorites.
Now, would you put some soil down to plant it in? Because this we live, of course, you know how there's nothing but clay in this area. And it seems like the soil isn't great there either. Should I add extra soil before I plant?
Absolutely, and that's always a concern because, you know, when you are planting under trees and you have competition around them, and if you have shallow root systems, now the balance is you can bring an inch or two of loose topsoil in there, so there's some soil for the plants, the ground cover to grow in, but you don't want to bury the tree roots. You know, if you start putting excessive soil on there, that starts to cause some problems for the trees.
Right.
So that's where I say if you can create a little bit of a mulch area immediately around the tree, and then as you migrate out, maybe just a little bit of loose topsoil to get some ground covers going.
All right. Well, I appreciate your question.
That's always an issue.
Answers,
Thank you, Susan.
All
Have
right.
a
Thank
great
you.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. Mary Ann's going to be with us when we return. Stay tuned. Okay, the hour flies by, so we're going to quickly get to Mary Ann, who's calling from D.C. Hi, Mary Ann.
Yes, hello. How are you this morning?
Great. Thanks for holding.
Thank you.
What can we do for you?
Well, I was calling about the creeping bramble. I'm wondering if I could put that creeping bramble on the hill. I have a low-level hill in my backyard, and I have grass around the hill, but we're plowing it and mowing it all the time, and it's beginning to get bare and look rather bad. So I was wondering if I could put that creeping bramble there to let it stay in that particular area where the hill is.
I think that's an excellent choice for it. In my previous home, that's exactly where I became familiar with this plant, because I had a steep hillside and planted it on there, and it spreads. It covers a good bit of ground. And the concern with it is there was always some question about its winter hardiness, but we've been selling it for years. I've not experienced any kind of winter damage with it. And like I said, it will do anywhere from full sun to part shade. So it's a tough, durable plant. It stays close to the ground and it will spread out. And it roots along there, so it does provide good erosion control.
Now, how can I contain it from moving into other areas? Because I do have a tree that is planted up above that hill there. And rather than have it wrap around the tree or go over in another area, how can I contain it like a border?
Well, the good thing is this does not climb up the trees. It will grow around them, but it doesn't grow up. And it's just when I say periodic maintenance, you just have to go through with some trimmers, some hedge clippers, and it's sort of like along the edge of the lawn, or if it's moving into another flower bed, you just have to periodically, it might be 2-3 times a year, go out there, trim it back along that edge to keep it from spreading further. It does not produce an underground stem or rhizome, so it's not like some of these things that creep under the ground and root themselves and you have to pull out. You can just do this with a pair of hedge trimmers. So I think it's a very good choice for that use.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much for the call, Marian.
Well, thank you.
Have a great
good
weekend.
day.
Thanks. Okay, our next caller is Gil, who's calling from Mason Neck. Hey, Gil.
Hi, how are you?
Great, and you?
Doing fine.
Good. I've got a question. I've got a downward sloping backyard that meets a gully in the back where our chain link fence is, and it's a bare area but heavily shaded by forest trees and a creek behind it. And I was just wondering, what could I do to keep the soil erosion from, continuing where the gully is? And also, I've got a large deck where I look out over that forest area. What could I plant down there that would be fragrant? Like, could we do honeysuckle in a shaded area, or something that would contain the soil erosion?
There's I think you're probably going to need a sort of a combination of approaches. The way you're talking about a gully and a steep hillside, that volume of water, you probably are going to need some type of structural control right in that gully, meaning like a dry stream bed, where you put down some landscape fabric, some rocks on there, something that's going to slow down that water. This is sight unseen. But adjacent to that, along the embankments, you might be able to come in with a ground cover. Now, that Japanese honeysuckle is a very aggressive, invasive vine. It climbs up into the trees. I'm really not going to get on board with that. Everybody loves it because it's pretty and it's fragrant, but it's just too aggressive. I think you might be looking at, I don't know if there's going to be any fragrant plants that are going to work for you in that type of situation. Well, actually, I'm going to back up. I'm going to say that sweet box, that sarcococa we were talking about earlier. It's a little low evergreen shrub, tops out at about 18 inches tall. It's called sweet box because it does have a fragrant blossom in early spring, sort of, even sometimes as early as February, but typically March. But it's a wonderfully sweet fragrance. It does well in shade. It's deer resistant. That's one I think you might take a look at, but it's probably going to be a combination with some terracing or stone or something to mitigate that flow of water.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would invite you to bring pictures in.
Yeah.
Tom, bring pictures in the garden center, and we can actually look at that and offer you some suggestions.
Great. Okay. I think we have one more caller, Mike, who's calling from North Beach. Are you there, Mike?
Yes, I'm there.
We've got a minute left. Do you have a really quick question?
I got some juniper bushes at the end of the property line, and last year I stupidly put some weed killer on them and knocked half of them out.
Right.
So I want to know what's a good time to replant them, and what's a good way to prevent weeds from popping up?
I would say you can replant right now is a good time to do that. After you've planted, once you have everything finished, just before you put the mulch in there, put down a weed preventer. You can use either Amaze, which is A-M-A-Z-E, or Preen, P-R-E-E-N, garden weed preventer. So get everything planted, put your weed preventer down, then put a couple inches of mulch on it. Reapply that weed preventer about once every 3 months. So you put it down now and then probably again in early spring around March. But if you stay consistent with that weed preventer, you can keep the weeds from becoming a problem in the future.
Great.
Okay, great show. Appreciate the help.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
good question. Thanks for watching.
Perfect. We have to run. Hope you've enjoyed learning about some of these lawn alternatives. But speaking of lawns, as you mentioned, next week we're going to be talking about lawns with our special guest, Mike Goatley from Virginia Tech. So have a great week. Come by the seminars. You have to choose which one, but they're all great. So have a great week.